So, David, they just announced the 2026 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. Out of the eight inductees that just went in, who did you think deserved it the most? Who are you most excited about going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Who do I think deserved it? Who I'm most excited? There's a two-part answer, okay?
Sure.
Number one, if given credibility of getting in, right? Given the credibility of getting in, easily Oasis, probably my top five favorite bands of all time. Massive Oasis fan. That being said, second part of the answer is that I'm not a fan of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think that they're uh, I think that any Hall of Fame authority is bogus to me. I think there's people in there that are not considered rock and roll all the time. It since the beginning. I think it was like '88. They already had people that weren't rock and roll in there.
I believe so.
So it should be called like the popular music Hall of Fame or like the music Hall of Fame or something else because there happens to be this clash of an argument always whereas there's gatekeeping and they gatekeep who can get in, but it's bogus. It's like Orwellian, the title itself to where people are getting it. You're like, I love Wu-Tang Clan. Love them. Probably the greatest rap group of all time, like legendary. Huge fan. If I go into a record store and I see Wu-Tang Clan in the rock section or the rock and roll section, I'm going to say, what's up with this? This doesn't make any sense. Are you crazy?
Yes.
So it negates, you have to point at something. A label is a label. Words have definition for a meaning. If we don't define them, then we're pointing at like everything. The point is that it's not the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It hasn't been. And I don't like authorities anyways. I don't like gatekeeping anyways. So that being said, do I like hearing about my favorite bands that's sort of been in the shadows for a while, at least in the United States, having a massive comeback last year, and then now also continuing to piggyback on that where they get enough momentum to where they're accepted into the main the main like sort of like a categorical insider society or whatever that like it's cool. Yeah, fine. Like I like the fact that I wake up and I can see Oasis on in the headlines in this country. Like, so I'm happy about that.
Very good. And I felt that they should be in as well, but I thought the reason they should have been in, and this is something I have argued about with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, until very, very recently, was very US centric. They didn't pay attention to worldwide success. If you go worldwide success, I think Oasis is an easy Rock and Roll Hall of Fame candidate.
Yeah.
So I felt when I did my show, my take on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees a few months ago, they were one of my first choices, and they were one of my first choices when I did my show last year. And I realized in this country that their biggest selling album by far was What's the Story, Morning Glory. Now, they did have other successful albums, but I don't just necessarily go by the success of those albums. How well has their music stood up? And how great were those albums? I think definitely maybe a 10 out of 10. And I got into the band at that time. I think that The Master Plan is a fantastic album, and it's an album of B-sides. What I really love about Oasis is the fact that they take you back to the Beatles and the Creedence Clearwater Revival and the Smiths, and the fact that they had B-sides that were just as strong as the A-sides, or they had singles that weren't necessarily on the original albums. But they were so strong on their own. That's how great the songwriting core was in that band. And in this case, it's primarily Noel. So to me, that stands for a lot, and their worldwide success. And as you mentioned, they're going back out and playing stadiums in the United States now. Now, I know a lot of that is based on demand because they haven't toured the States in a long time, I believe.
Yeah, oh 09.
Oh nine. So yeah, so we're talking it was 16 years. So this was something a lot of people were waiting for that makes a lot of sense. I think their music has really stood up. I don't pay attention to the drama. For me, it's about the music. Okay. So another one of my favorite bands who did not get in this year is in that same category, the Black Crowes. But Oasis, I think their music is still on its own. And even though they got a lot of criticism early on, I remember because I came on the first album, a lot of criticism, them sounding too much like the Beatles, and this song, Cigarettes and Alcohol, sounds like Bang a Con, Get It On, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. There's influences around their sleeves at times, but they did carve out their own niche. They carved out their own sound. And they became very, very successful, and their music is still played a lot today. And it's that worldwide success you cannot deny.
Yeah, right on. And I always thought that the Beatles thing was overstated. It was more like them being big and being from England and sort of like kind of like taking over the world type of deal alluded more to the Beatles than I'm never like listening to one of their songs and I'm humming like as if it was a rap sample. Like I'm humming along the same melody and being like, "Oh, this was originally Yesterday by the Beatles." Like that rarely happens. Um, it's a low resolution take. I always cringe when I see people, especially in the US, when you're watching journalists who kind of always want to like take jabs at them when you go back and you read like reviews and stuff. And that's the first thing that you see is them mentioning the Beatles. And it's like, I can tell you didn't really do your homework. At the end of the day, Oasis was part of a completely different wave of music that was happening in England than was happening in the US. They happened to just catch a ride on like our alternative wave of just being alternative, stuff that just sounds different. But in England, it was a completely different movement. Even the idea of them having the B-sides, singles and vinyl singles were a big deal over there. I don't know if that really was the case in the US, but it was a big deal to where they would release a single at the time, like maybe every like 4 or 5 months. It would have three B-sides on it, two B-sides on it, and those songs would be not included on the album releases, and those songs were just as potent as the A side was, and that helped build the lore at the time about how not only do you get the album but you get the B side. They would be on, like late night shows, where you're performing their music and stuff in 94, 95, and they would be playing the B sides there and nobody would hear them. Like it's not like no one would hear. They wouldn't. What I say by no one would hear them, I'm saying that they wouldn't be the song that was promoted. It's not what you probably would have expected them to play. And those songs, because of the fandom and the pandemonium that was going on behind them, the fan base like adopted those and embraced them just as much. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I don't know, it could check me on this. It takes a lot of countries to count, but I think What's the Story, Morning Glory is their highest selling album in every country.
I believe it
Even
is.
though, yeah, even though like they have other ones that were multi-platinum all over the place, that's still the juggernaut. Like that's the one that is sort of, that's the one to beat. You're just not, it's very hard to make an album that's that potent with, and it was a whole movement in England. It wasn't as much here, but we still rode that wave. That was like a quadruple platinum album, I think, just in the 90s, never mind like re-releases and all that.
I believe, and I remember reading this a long time ago. I think that's one of the biggest selling albums in the world.
Yeah.
Like over 20 million worldwide, easy.
Yeah. 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 I think in its time, it was 14 times platinum in England alone. and they go by a different metric, where platinum is 300,000 units, I believe.
Okay.
So so it's different over there. I think 100,000 units is a gold record in England. England has a much smaller population than the US. So,
Yes.
um, but I mean, in the US, it's like quadruple. It's selling in Australia and Canada and all the European countries. South America, they were still, even when they weren't big, when they in the 2000s, when they weren't that big here, they were still as like U2 level in South America and England. Like every single album came out multi-platinum in England, debuted at number one. I think all of them at least had a number one single on all those albums that are supposedly like, you know, didn't really do much here. Um, they kind of got a little bit of a wave, with at least one, I think they had at least one gold record in '05 with Don't Believe the Truth. And that was due to the fact that there was a bit of a resurgence with that like crunchy rock
Yeah.
with Strokes and White Stripes and stuff, to where a it was palpable that that sort of style of rock was interesting, something that was like garage rock and or at least throwback. Oasis is not garage rock, but they are throwback, and they sort of like mingle with that crowd. So when I saw them live in '05, and who opened for them on one of the shows was Jet, if you
Okay.
remember Jet.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And at the time, Jet was the bigger band, at least in the United States, but they still were the opening act because it's Oasis. Like, um, yeah.
Oasis had that big reputation, though. They like Jet were big for a short period of time, but they never were as big here as Oasis were in the '90s. So I mean, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, I think that they also were touring with them outside of the US on that leg. At the time, Jet, I believe their album was at least platinum.
Okay.
So they were bigger than Oasis at the time here. They had songs on the radio. Was it "Are You Gonna Be My Girl"?
Yes.
Look what you done had come out.
Yes.
Um, there was another one that I forget the name of that was a single, but those were heavy rock rotation songs that were being played all the time. And it was due to just, I think some people had like, oh yeah, like I think it's documented they were blackballed by record companies at that time did not want rough and ready rock star types in the US. They wanted, let's you're going to play ball, you're nice and tidy, you're going to be very political, not in talking about like politics, but just the actual general term of being very political, with being very kind and do what we tell you to do, and don't make any waves, and do what's best for the record companies. And so you had a lot of safe acts and people that, like Oasis, that are just like they're lower income, just poor people. Like they're not tactful, and they at a very young age they won the lottery in a sense, and they went on a wild ride of like, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that didn't really help their etiquette. that they didn't, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
these are like footballer types that are like getting drunk and chanting about like their favorite soccer teams and stuff. It's not the crowd. It's not the Genesis crowd. You know what I mean? It's not like
Yes,
these
exactly.
very artistic, like, we went to art school and we're proper and stuff. At the time, the big band to beat was Coldplay.
That's
And I
true.
do love early Coldplay. But they were like the next big band from England and you saw that juxtapositioning of, if you were in England, at least you'd see them both in the press. And it was kind of like old wave, new wave. And that was interesting. That was interesting.
Very good. What do you all think of Oasis being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Please let us know in the comments. Talk to you soon.